whatever it is we're doing before, to get ready for bed. What I'll do is I'll demand a bedtime story, right? I will say, I want a bedtime story, and predictably and inevitably.
Hello and welcome to episode 206 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 24th of February. I hope you've had a good week and you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I'm a 3-time CMO and trusted market advisor. I'm going to help my chums share the marketing street knowledge that I hope will inspire your inner rockstar. Come and say hello. You can find links to me and my guests in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com or on LinkedIn at Rockstar CMO. And we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This week in the Marketing Studio, I'll pick the brains of Jeff Clark to understand revenue operations and what this means for marketing. And in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar, I'll join Robert Rose over a cocktail and we have a chat about storytelling. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Right, it's time for my free consultation with our resident strategy advisor, former Forrester Research Director, Jeff Clark, in the Rockstar CMO Marketing Studio.
Ian, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's as we usually report on what's going on outside my window. It's bright and sunny and a little cool.
Yes.
Kind of like winter, but kind of not. So
You're very
it's getting warmer and it's getting brighter earlier and later, which is good.
Yeah, I think I've said this on the last couple of episodes when we've been recording. So recording this on Wednesday. And we've had a storm roll through a couple and more as well. And it's just, it's not raining right now, as you can see, but it has been bloody miserable. It is the very weather you would expect of jolly old England. It's mild, but it's grey and it's miserable. So
is that why it's called jolly old England? Because you have to sort of fake yourself out of the fact that it's not very jolly.
Yeah, it's all marketing, mate. It's all marketing. Yes, no, we are. I don't know. We're not that renowned for being jolly, are we? The English? I don't know. So yes, I don't know why it's called jolly old England. We'll have to look that up. Anyway, so that's the weather done, and me moaning, which is good. That sets the tone. Mostly, it's going to be a topic for you mostly this week, mate, because we've been talking off air about revenue operations, which is an area I know a little bit, not very much about, and I know that's something that was an area of study for you when you were back at Forrester. A couple of articles have floated our way over the last couple of months, so we've been parking them in our little to-do folder or our to-do notes because although you may not think so from the way that I stumble over my words, we do prepare for these things.
Yes.
And we've talked a lot about marketing operations and MOPS, and I think we've done that a lot, and it's very much key to one of our 5 fundamentals, which is the machine. So I'm curious about this revenue ops thing and what it means to marketing leaders, and I hope that you could share some of your experience. And wonder if it's actually, from what I've read, is it the answer to this much maligned relationship between sales and marketing that we have? Or is it just a distraction from the business of just getting our marketing shit done? What say you, Jeff?
Well, it is definitely one of those topics that, became in vogue 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, is to be, accurate. It's what's interesting is that, I remember, things evolve. They always evolve. And I remember kind of midway through my career, and there really wasn't anything. I mean, there was no concept of operations, either marketing ops, sales ops. But I started a database marketing team, back in early 2000s, and they did the data. They worked on the customer database and the email systems and blah blah blah, tracking tools and things like that. But as we got into the era of leads and lead flow and CRM systems and all, kind of like the mid 2000s, then both sales and marketing created operations teams. Mm-hmm. And that's where, where I was working, we recast the function as marketing ops.
Yeah.
And, to function well, those two teams, have to be aligned on a lot of things like, what's the lead in the opportunity process look like? Where's the handoffs? What are what types of data to use for metrics? Are we talking about revenue, percent of revenue, opportunity value, blah, 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 pipeline. And so you've got these two teams that, even though they're reporting up to, the CMO and or the head of sales, then, they've got to be aligned. Mm-hmm. But, as the business recognizes that the value of looking across the whole buyer journey and how are we developing our, future revenue, then it's like the organization as a whole starts to think about this thing a little bit more holistically. And so, when I was at Serious Decisions, we were kind of surveying on this, and in most cases, there was separate revenue and sales marketing and sales operations team, and trying to get alignment. But there was a small percentage of organizations that had what they defined as RevOps, typically reporting up to the chief revenue officer. So that would typically be sales. Whether marketing reported up to the revenue officer or not, it's like that's where the operations team sat.
Right. Okay. And as you were talking there, I was thinking, So the evolution, and it's funny, isn't it? The amount of time the relatively short amount of time that's actually gone by in terms of the evolution of these disciplines that we now take for granted, like marketing operations and stuff. And I remember when I was at SendShare, I had a marketing operations folks, obviously as a CMO. That's my sort of preferred structure. But they worked very closely with the sales ops people. So I think if you've got a good relationship and a good blended team there, I think that works quite well, doesn't it? So that's what I think. And then, is there a difference between what function revenue ops performs to what you just described, as in what does sales ops and marketing ops perform?
Well, I think that, it is part of this evolution, whereas, revenue ops is, as we refer to one, or was referred to in one of the articles we were using as inspiration, is closing the customer value gap and driving commercial performance. Mm-hmm. And so that takes it kind of above, the specific interests of just marketing or just sales. And so the difference really, to an extent is, do you want this group to be, more holistic in their view, and then figuring out where it reports, or do you literally want it, reporting up to the chief revenue officer, or do you want it to split, but making sure they're tightly aligned? I mean, it's kind of tough, because you could say that this is like you were just describing, this is a virtual team that just needs to work together, and they need to define things together. But sometimes, based on the culture, the nature maybe of the individuals that are, in the leadership positions, it needs to point, one way or the other. The pro for combining into a unified group is that it makes decision making easier. The con is that somebody's going to get shortchanged. As the CMO lose direct access to kind of the resources that make his marketing team run well, or say the same thing about maybe a chief product officer or a chief customer officer that had their own little operations team. You move it all together, and and then you sort of lose some of that control. One of the things that, I was thinking back in my experience, we were doing a technology assessment for company called Commvault. And, when we do the technology assessments, we were looking at not just the tech, but the processes, the data, et cetera, et cetera. And, and they actually, decided to create a revenue ops team because they were just internally, they were having too many struggles with the decision making, and they had to get that whole revenue process right. So they decided to combine it. They fixed the process, and what they said to me, I remember saying in retrospect was that was probably the best decision to make at that time.
Right. So, so this is about de-siloing the. I guess it's de-siloing the operations of revenue, isn't it? It's de-siloing, not to use the same words, but it's de-siloing demand generation, attribution tracking, and all that good stuff. So you can then track from a marketing inbound lead or a account-based marketing approach that we're taking all the way through to revenue, right? So, but isn't that really what we as marketers should be doing now? In the CMO role that I was doing at Spotler, for example, the demand team were really keen to know what happened to leads, what happened to the revenue, did they have revenue? Is there still the concept that marketing ops just chuck something over the wall? It is a bit like this argument about where business development should sit. Should it sit within marketing, or whether it should sit within sales? So are we just setting up a new organization because an organization is broken and people aren't working well together? What's going on here?
You might say yes to that. Well, it is. It's. That is the key question: is why are we doing this? What can we go through the pros and cons of making this change? And it starts to. I even think about the evolution of IT, because there are some similarities here. Whereas, IT used to be, serving all the individual, units within the business, and they had to create liaisons so that they know how they serve their internal customers well. And, they started to define, here's the things that IT has control over. Here's things that marketing has control over in terms of like your MarTech. Here's the things sales has control over. So you kind of create this hybrid of a centralized versus decentralized, organization. And I think the same thing starts to become like with RevOps, if you truly create a centralized function that's looking at the revenue, all the revenue processes from beginning to end, then you're going to have to create liaisons that are working for your internal, making sure that the work for your internal customers, is happening. So the CMO, may need to retain some staff that we would typically throw into operations, maybe like their analytics team, or maybe like their project management office or something like that, works at the CMO's discretion, while data, tech, process, at least around revenue process stuff, is all worked by that more holistic RevOps team. So,
I don't really.
The other. Oh, go ahead.
No, one of the things I was going to introduce here, so that that sort of was answering the question that I was asking there about it sounds to me like this should be a blended team. It also sounds to me like our marketing operations needs to provide that service, or somebody needs to provide that service to the company, and why shouldn't it be marketing operations? So I'm not sure that there's the case. But are we? And also, if you're a CMO and you've got a chief commercial officer, and there's two of you side by side, then you're not going to hand over to somebody in his team to measure your performance, are you? So does revenue ops actually require us to have this new CRO type of role sitting over marketing and sales, and therefore, that is the driver for having revenue ops, or does revenue ops also work in that other model where you've got a CMO and a
So as I remember when we were surveying the B2B organizations, that the revenue ops typically showed up in organizations that are in industries that are extremely sales driven. So, if you get into a lot of B2B manufacturing, distribution. There is marketing, but marketing is typically about kind of brand and it's either a function of sales or it's typically about brand and packaging and some other things that are that don't get into the demand revenue realm. But I think that partially to answer your question, it's going to depend on the culture and the strengths of the executive team, the individuals on the executive team. Because if you have a sales leader who is like basically determining how revenue and everything that's supporting revenue is going to happen, then they're going to want to scoop up this RevOps team. Yeah. If you've got a CMO who is really charting the future, because one of the differences of the many between marketing and sales, marketing tends to look long term or at least midterm. Yeah. Sales tends to look quarter to quarter, end of the year. Yeah. So if the focus is on, maybe you've got to improve customer satisfaction, the customer experience, all these things that tend to go into the marketing realm, then maybe that's where your RevOps team should reside.
Yeah, it's interesting because it opens up quite a lot of that debate, doesn't it, about the role of marketing, and it's slightly different in different organizations, isn't it? In terms of, sometimes it is the color and in department or the folks that were responsible for brand and that kind of thing, and not in the critical path of revenue. And in other organizations, marketing is much more respected as an investment and therefore should own revenue operations as a practice rather than as a team, if you see what I mean. Do you know what I mean? The operations of revenue.
The experience that I had, even though in 3 different companies, I worked very closely with sales ops, and my team worked very closely with sales ops, is that the thing is that the sales ops team was just, they just were typically overloaded with reports and analysis on pipeline and maybe sales skills issues and all kinds of things that were like very short term. And it's like you try to say, well, let's step back and fix the whole, for lack of a better term, the whole lead to close process. And they're like, oh, yeah.
That's a really good point, because if you outsource your marketing operations to revenue operations from a metrics and analytics perspective, as you say, those guys are reporting on a weekly, monthly, daily, quarterly basis in terms of hot lead flow as it stands. And you may lose that medium to long-term view of your strategy, mightn't you? And how are you measuring those? And how are you measuring the people that are your engagement with people that aren't in market yet, or the very top of funnel people? That the sales operations people, quite rightly, are going to care much less about those folks, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So it just raises an interesting debate, doesn't it? Particularly when you think about the CRO thing. But I think but the important point I think you made there is certain organisations this will fit, sales-led organisations, certain kinds of products, certain kinds of B2B industries. But in other industries that are maybe more marketing or product-led, then you probably want all of this sitting in marketing, this data, right? And that you feed that over to sales and have a tight collaboration.
Or again, you're kind of like separating certain skill sets to say, okay, we've got maybe if it's marketing led, maybe we've got a small sales ops team that's really focused on sales reporting and process, but a lot of the other decisions about tech, data, et cetera, are being driven by marketing.
But I would encourage anybody to get their marketing ops to get as close to revenue as possible, because I think you could almost offer it as a service, couldn't you, from within your teams, the sales team, and that would help build bridges and develop that relationship, wouldn't it? If you because who the fuck wants to do this analytical stuff? Nobody. You get the right kind of marketing ops geek who loves the data and loves digging into it. It doesn't matter if he's reporting near-term sales attribution data or if he's reporting on longer-term marketing attribution data. It's all data to them, isn't it? So I think that's really interesting.
There are people out there like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was lucky when I was at Accenture. I had 2 guys that were they happened to be guys that were very much into. One of them was like because they used Salesforce and the marketing team used HubSpot. And therefore, the two of them came together, realized some really fundamental problems of the way the data models works in both of those products. Let's put that aside. But they were both trying to achieve the same thing. It was a really good meeting of minds. I really enjoyed that kind of thing that we got going. Anyway, so we talked about just a minute ago, we were talking about articles. We alluded to articles that inspired us. And of course, friend of the show, Forrester Principal Analyst Simon Daniels, we mentioned his work back in December when we did our prediction show. And he wrote this great piece, didn't he, about past, present and future of RevOps. And in the past, he shared a similar story to what you just did about, in the beginning there was nothing, right? And now we've created this. Now,
before the Big Bang.
Yeah. So, but what I wanted to ask you is, if you were advising a startup or a new business or a team that had an immature sales and marketing team, let's put it like that, and they're just forming these functions, would you create a RevOps team or a MOPS team? Which way would you lean?
I would, so first I have to throw in my little aside because I loved Simon's reference to Christmas Carol, one of my favorite Dickens stories about, Scrooge visiting the past, present, and future. Yeah. So it was appropriate given, nice I think he posted it in December. But I think that at the outset, that really it is important for the executive leaders to have their own operations staff. Mm-hmm. And with the caveat that they have to work together. And as the company matures, then that's where you start to find the different operating models. Mm-hmm. 'Cause even if you get into, large organizations, I remember working with SAP and you could take all the tech data process. They had different teams that worked those things that were separate from, I actually can't remember exactly where they reported up to, or they probably reported up to various places because, in a gigantic organization, you'd say, I'm going to put somebody, as you said, somebody who really understands data and how to put models together and be able to do predictive work. I'm putting them all on one team, and they may report up to somebody who's, an analytics guru on the executive team. So anyway, the operating models will change over time, but go back to answering your question directly. I think that sales and marketing leaders really need to start out with their own operations staff when you're small.
Right. I thought you were sitting on the fence there for a minute there, but yeah, it does sound like that, and then evolve into it. Because the other thing is, in smaller teams, you see that there are salespeople that are having to. They're doing this work instead of selling, which is where I think that if you can get a good little MOPS team together early doors and they can offer that as a service, sales will bite your arm off, right? They're not going to be saying, "Oh, I need it," because what sales guy wants to fill in anything ever on anything? Now I'm hugely.
I know.
I'm casting aspersions. Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing something with
it's not a good or bad thing. It's just a thing. They're wicked. That's what when I start to work side by side with salespeople, particularly like when I was working in the EMEA office back when I was at Pega, and it's like I'm in just the next cubicle over from people in sales, and it's like you see the work that they have to do.
Exactly.
It's administrative, that's not talking to customers. It's really and
also the boss is phoning them every half an hour, going, "Where's this deal? Where's this deal? Where's this deal?"
Where's your pipeline report?
What? Where's your TPS reports? Anyway, so in that same article, just to carry on with our Simon thing. He cites that technology, the complexity of attribution of revenue and privacy as being the key drivers of revenue operations. To me, that sounds like that's a key driver for sales and marketing operations in general. But what's your take on that?
Well, that is those things specifically are the reason why my example of Commvault that I mentioned earlier, created a RevOps team. It's like, marketing leadership was in flux. Sales was under pressure to fix, the whole driving revenue issue. Not that they were necessarily having overall revenue problems, but it's like there were just these internal things they needed to work through. They adopted the concept of, which we've mentioned a few times in the show, this demand unit waterfall, where you're trying to look at the flow from beginning to end in a funnel as opportunities, not as leads, and turning into opportunities.
Do you know that?
And so,
just to interrupt for a second, I think that would be a nice rabbit hole for us to dive down at one point, won't it? Because you have referred to this a couple of times from Forrester about the demand unit waterfall thing, and you do see it mentioned in a lot of Forrester's work. So it'd be interesting to get your take on what that's all about as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And and so, what they determined was, the key issue was this process. And so to fix the process, they said, we gotta create a unified team. And that unified team could stay unified for some period of time. And then eventually, again, operating models, things change and evolve, and operating models may change with that. So, and that worked well because it simplified the decision making. And, again, we've all worked in companies where either the sales and marketing leaders were like, tied at the hip, or they were, at different sides of the building, or, whatever. Yeah. Which makes it hard for, I mean, when those leaders aren't working well together, it makes it hard for the ops teams underneath to work well together.
Yeah. And that's the question it's not in the notes, but one of the things that I want to follow up on this, thinking about what you were saying there, but I think it'd be interesting to know, was that Commvault decision made in a point of pain, i.e., revenue was down and they were trying to figure out where the fucking problem was? There was a lot of finger pointing going on and blame. Or was it done at a point of growth where they're like, wow, we need to get a handle on this and understand why things are so good? Because I think that's what changes it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was more at a point of pain. And again, as I said, the marketing leadership was in flux. So then it's like, if I'm going to, turn to somebody on the executive team to say, you've got to fix this, then I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to turn to the guy heading the sales team or revenue CRO and say, okay, here, you fix it. And he's going to say, okay, I need these resources, pull it together. Okay, now we're off and we're running.
I think that, that's also, I think, there's a couple of things we've raised here in terms of, it depends on the nature of the marketing and sales teams, depending on your business and all that kind of stuff. But I do think sometimes these initiatives are triggered by a knee-jerk reaction to a problem, and you end up spending so much time sort of realigning your ducks and not really, and forming teams and calling things and not really solving what the underlying problem is. You're just trying to sort of figure out who's responsible, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes. Getting your ducks in a row, as my mother always used to say.
So on every topic right now, as we've kind of matured our 5 effing fundamentals, and we now have it quite nicely down as the master plan, the knowledge, the story, the campaign, and the machine. And just for anybody who's never listened to us before, those are what we believe are the 5 fundamentals of B2B marketing. Where does this sit within that, Jeff?
This is definitely the machine, because it's the group that make sure that the rest of the organizations has the capabilities to run the other 4 fundamentals and hit your goals. And this is where the relationship is in the master plan. The CMO and his leadership team should be identifying what kind of capabilities they need to hit their goals, and then it's like you turn to your marketing ops team and say, okay, how can you help us, acquire new technology, fix this, upskill that, improve data, whatever that dependency is. And so the good thing is that here at Rockstar CMO, we do have some tools and some advisory to help people conduct that assessment if you're so interested.
I think that's the first time we've tried doing any selling in this particular segment. I do mention in the bits in between, the segues, or whatever it's called, that you're available to give advice. So absolutely, I'd encourage anybody to get in touch. hello@rockstarcmo.com. Or come to our website, and as you say, I mean, you've got more than tools and advisory. You've actually got a methodology, haven't you, for doing this that you've used with clients. And I think that if folks are curious about whether their marketing operations is operational, and if their machine is working, then I think that's a good place to come.
Very good.
What a nice way to end. I mean, look at us all selling in that. We need our own revenue operations. All right, mate. So the last thing on the agenda is the song. So what are we going with this week?
We're going to play out with the song Machine, which you reminded we may have used
Twice.
once before or twice. From Imagine Dragons in 2018, the line they said, when you're going to see I'm part of your machine, pause, I am the machine.
I like that.
So anyway, I think that's a great song to play with. I almost went a plug for one of my old favorites from my college days, Welcome to the Machine by Pink Floyd, because it says, you've been in the pipeline, filling in time. That's kind of a downer song. So let's go with Machine.
Yeah, let's be positive. Leave something positive for the listeners. So I'll play it with The Machine from Imagine Dragons from 2018. And Jeff, will you be welcoming me into the studio next week?
Yes.
All right, buddy.
All my life been sitting at the table, watching them keys and living in a fable. Looks like I'm money and never left a wishing, but now it's about time to raise up and petition. All my life been sitting at the table, watching them keys and living in a fable. Looks like money and never left a wishing, but now it's about time to stand up and petition. 'Cause I've been wondering when you're gonna see I'm not for sale. Been questioning when you're gonna.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a little bit of Machine by Imagine Dragons. And if you have something on your mind, why not pick Jeff's brain on your marketing problem? Give us a shout at Rockstar CMO and book a consultation. Right, it's that time of the week to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join the chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Muppets. What are you drinking?
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the bar. It has been an interesting week, a long week. There's been quite a bit that happened this week. A lot with AI that happened this week. I mean, this last week, since we last were in the bar together, new developments in this whole Sora thing from OpenAI, video and. That's crazy. Well, and that is we're going to celebrate a little bit of that this week with our cocktail, because one of the main videos that was featured on the OpenAI's website was a woman walking through the streets, in a very sort of Blade Runner-y, sort of rainy night, sort of lights reflecting in the street sort of way. Yeah. In the video, there's a very creepy guy walking behind her, which is I find fascinating with this video. Like this is what they chose to feature. But in any event, it isn't supposed to be in Tokyo, and so I thought we'd celebrate that with a very simple cocktail, which is have you tried Japanese whiskey?
No, I think you've mentioned it before, and I've said I should try that, and I haven't yet.
It can be brilliant.
Yeah?
It really is. It rivals anything that you would get in Ireland or Scotland. And now all the Irishmen and Scotsmen are yelling at the screen right about now. But it is really good. And we're going to be drinking it's as simple as it gets, right? So the brand of Japanese whiskey is called Hakushu. It's a Hakushu 12-year whiskey. Yeah. It is absolutely brilliant. It's very hard to find. I will tell you that. It's very, very difficult to find. And it's now become a bit of a collector's item. So that has driven up the price quite a bit. So, but we have a bottle and we're going to drink some. So,
classy.
And it's basically just, it's as simple, as taking your scotch the way you like it, whether you like it with a little splash of water in there, whether you like it neat, whether you like it with a big rock. That's really the only three ways you can have this. Nice. And because this is not a cocktail, you don't put this in, you don't put anything in this. So you sip this neat, maybe on the rocks, which would mean one giant good ice cube, or maybe with a splash of water, as the aficionados do. And it's just a beautiful, wonderful sort of. It's got vanilla in it. It's got a very light peat to it. It's really quite good.
Nice. This sounds nice. I should get back into whiskey. I like that. I got a bit put off, I think, by some really peaty whiskey. I think Lafrogue and stuff like that. But I did
too. I got turned off of whiskey for that exact reason myself. The really smoky stuff.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore. So I got into bourbon because of that. I started getting more into bourbon because of my lack of interest in the smoky, peaty sort of scotches.
Yeah, I think for me, same. And living in the US, and it's got to be bourbon when you're living in the US, and of course, Mad Men, and probably a little bit of influence from you. And I started drinking a lot of bourbon. Mind you, it's tequila, so I really need to discover my tequila teeth, or whatever you get. I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Tequila legs. Tequila arms. I don't know. All right, mate. So I presume, would I be right in presuming we're going east with these drinks?
I missed that.
Are we going east with these drinks? Where are we drinking these?
We are going. Yes, we are indeed going east. We are headed east, and we're going to sit. We're going to go right to that street on that Sora video. And so, have you ever? You've been to Tokyo before, have you not?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
It's just a brilliant city. It's one of my favorite places. It's so good. Every time I go, I take so many pictures because of the. It's hard to describe, but that sort of all those neon lights and the way that they do the streets and everything is really, I mean, you would think it wouldn't be, but it truly is beautiful. So, and it's super quiet, and it's just a wonderful city to go find food and drink and all the sorts of things. So yes, that's where we're going to go. We're going to find ourselves one of those little places. Yeah. There are these amazing little places in Tokyo where you can walk in and the menu's on an iPad, and you literally just like tap a bunch of stuff that you want, and food comes out, and you can just sit there and eat Japanese street food, and it's just amazing. Nice. So that's where we'll find ourselves.
Yes, please. I would like to do that, please.
Yeah.
When we're in such a lovely, beautiful place, but conversation no doubt will turn to marketing with us too. What are we discussing this week?
We're going to talk about storytelling.
Oh.
I had an interesting thing happen. So my wife and I have this funny little banter that we do occasionally before bed. It's sort of our end of evening ritual. And so as we're brushing our teeth and getting a glass of water, or, whatever it is we're doing before, to get ready for bed, what I'll do is I'll demand a bedtime story, right? I will say, I want a bedtime story. And, predictably and inevitably, she refuses. And then I say, okay, well, then I'll tell you a bedtime story. And now she doesn't want that either, obviously. So we end up going back and forth in this sort of, very faux heated negotiation. And, I offer, okay, well, if you don't want a story, how about a song or a poem, or I'll read you a legal contract, or, whatever it is, a limerick. She wants none of that. And then we always end up where we end up, which is, okay, agreeing that we've both been in a story for the last 20 minutes, and we go to sleep. And I know it's a little weird, but it's what keeps our marriage fresh. But anyway, it reminded me of a shift that I have seen in storytelling, brand storytelling, specifically. And so it goes like this, which is it's a shift that I'm seeing really become a super important part of what it is we do as content creators and marketers. And so if we look at sort of the state of the state, right, where generative AI is making how-to content, derivative content, it's even more commoditized than if it even could be more commoditized, it now is. Yeah. So therefore, we can assume that over the next short term, certainly, maybe the long term too, but maybe certainly in the short term, trust in our digital experiences is going to wane, right? It's going to wane in the short term because people are going to start to assume that it's AI created, and search engines are broken, and it's really hard to uncover valuable information unless you can create that trust, to create the trust with audiences. And audiences are going to really start to value more things that are really personal, not necessarily personalized, but really personal, right? Personally valuable to them, where they go, this is exactly what I need and I need more of it, right? So if we lean into that, well, there's an interesting thing, because what we don't want to do is don't tell me a story about you, right? Don't tell me a story, because, and this is the classic, and most marketers have figured this out, that their brand isn't the center of the world, right? For example, when I would go to a client and say, tell me your story, tell me your brand story. And they would say, well, we need our audience to understand that our brand is going to save the planet, or our brand is, we need our customers to understand that they're innovative. And I would go, no, that's not how this works. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, wow, I wish that brand would tell me how innovative they are. But so now the same thing is, I'm not refuting, just to be clear, I'm not refuting the need that, in other words, I'm not negating that, right? When someone tells me we need our customers to understand how innovative we are, I get it. You do need to do that. You really do. That's an objective. It's not a story. It's just a goal, right? Yeah. And so the question is that that's not the story. You have to find where your story is. So we talk about the idea all the time, and this is really the heart of content marketing, and don't need to go into this in any detail, but the idea is that, your brand's stories are about demonstrating value, right? Demonstrating the value that you have. But all the way to the other side, like sort of the, don't make me tell you a story about you, which is so many times what we see our brands get to a customer and they go, okay, well, if it's not about us, basically we need our customer to tell the story about us. So we get testimonials or case studies or whatever. And what we're trying to, and what we think we're doing as marketers is, we're basically just shifting who's doing the telling about us, right? And we're still the center of the story, but we say, oh, the customer will tell our story for us. They'll tell their story, and by nature of that, they'll demonstrate how valuable we are, or how innovative we are, right? So we end up saying, not we need our audiences to understand how innovative we are. We say our customers need to tell our audiences how innovative we are. And now again, there's an application for that. The customer testimonial, the case study are all ways of making people or persuading people to make a transaction. But what it doesn't do, what neither of those things do, are create a more emotional or meaningful relationship with someone. And our brand is supposed to do that. When we're talking about brand storytelling, that's what we're really trying to do, is expand, deepen, widen, create more meaningful relationships with our customers. So that's the key. And what we need to do is start to think about shifting how we create content as a result of that. Now, the heart of that really is content marketing, but more than content marketing, it is about, well, for example, shifting the language that we use, right? So in both B2B and B2C marketing, we can get into sort of what I call the wise person on the hill scenario, right? Where, what we're trying to do is demonstrate how smart we are always, right? Everything is good. And on the customer side, it always becomes like, the customer case study is, well, this person had a problem and then they chose our brand and now it's all unicorns and rainbows, right? So we have to shift that language and put in struggle, the challenge, the vulnerability, the heartache, the unexpected downsides, and then thinking about widening and deepening the value that we deliver, whether it's education, whether it's inspiration, whether it's, it is putting the customer into the story. It's not a story about the customer. It's not a story that tells our story to the customer. It's rather a separate story that puts the customer into the cockpit of that story so that it's co-created, right? That's the new shift toward brand storytelling, putting them into the story where they feel comfortable, where they want to be part of it, where they want to co-create with us, where they are creating value with us, we are creating value with them, or we are enabling that value to be created. And thus, that's the new idea of brand storytelling, rather than those two sort of dumbbell extremes there, right? So, I mean, today's web is this roiling, bubbling, chaotic marketplace. It's got inspiration, it's got practicability, but it's also got outright lies and fake news and awful truths. And it's just this it's just this sort of stew of stuff. So we have to ditch the old playbook of thinking about always be closing or always be, converting or always be, thinking about us at the center of it, and putting our customer into a vehicle that allows them to create value for themselves. That's where they're comfortable, because they don't want a story and they don't want us to tell them a story, and they don't want to tell a story. They just want to be in the story. Right. And that's where I think it really is moving to.
Yeah. Is it so bold as to say that the customer is the hero? Or am I being a bit I don't know.
Well, it could be. See, that's the thing. It's when we often go to this idea of the customer is the hero. We then go, okay, we're done, right? We sort of, swipe our hands up and down. And we go, yep, we've done it. We've now made the customer the hero. So the customer is the hero, but what they're telling, the story that they're telling of where they're the hero, is how they were so heroic in selecting us, right? Or coming to our point of view, right? So in other words, your customer story ends up being something like, this person was really struggling in life and had a really hard time, and they're the hero of this wonderful story. So what did they do? Well, they went out and looked for an answer to this big problem, and they found us, and we are the shining star on the hill, and they climbed that hill themselves. So we have ostensibly made the customer the hero of the story, but we've still made us the big, we've made us, the facilitator of their success, right? Whereas putting the customer at the center of this into the story is putting us alongside them, like as a sidekick, right? Okay. In other words, we don't become sort of the shining star on the hill, the ring, the one ring to rule them all. We literally become, Frodo and Sam, right? Helping each other go through to find, co-create, and create value together, and fight demons, and do all the things that we have to do. That's the difference.
And make mistakes along that journey, right? I think,
and make mistakes, and unexpected challenges, even when we have success, right?
And that's
a classic example of this. We used to do this. Is one of the things we would talk about when we were talking about enterprise software is. If you successfully get to an implementation of an enterprise software project, you have accomplished something huge, but you've also opened up the entirety of all new challenges, right? And so people don't talk about that. Brands don't talk about that. They don't say, hey, listen, once you successfully implement this global content management system, you're going to have a whole new world of challenges to actually have to deal with, right? Everybody stops and says, no. All you need to do is deploy this enterprise software, and your world will be, bonbons and tequila forever. Right. But we don't but of course, if you do successfully achieve the implementation of that enterprise software, it's going to open up a whole new bag of worms for you. And let's acknowledge that, and let's go, that's together. We're in this fight with you.
Yeah. And that bag of worms is change, isn't it? And that's the thing.
It changes all the time.
And
I think, exactly right.
Yeah. And I think probably you say this as well. It's like, everybody loves change apart from when it happens to them. Right. So it's, you're going to be bringing change to the organization, and that's going to be the struggle, isn't it? It's how you cope with that. I think it's, and also where I thought this was going to go, because I remember I've got an old quote from you, and I've actually got it on our website. Is that you used to say that marketing is telling people you're a rock star, content marketing is showing the world you are one. So it's an evolution of that idea, isn't it? From that you used to talk about years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So where can people find more up-to-date quotes from you, Robert?
They can find us on at contentadvisory.net, our newest website, and our newest iteration of our website, I should say. So we're having fun with our new content platform over there and talking about all these things.
Good. And are you happy with this, or are we expecting iteration number 17?
I think we're happy with this for now. We'll see how it turns out.
Fantastic. I thought it was going like the like that big cathedral in Barcelona that it was never going to be finished, and you're always going to be keep building it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and then when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, mate?
They will find us at on LinkedIn, for me on LinkedIn anyway, which is where I spend most of my social media time these days.
Splendid. And also this week, the episode of This Old Marketing, you chatted a bit about social media world that you've just been at. So I'd recommend people sliding over to there. So This Old Marketing as well, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, mate. And most importantly for me, will you be in the bar next week?
I will indeed.
I'll see you then, my friend. Thank you, Robert. That is one of my favourite topics, you might have noticed, especially how we tell customer stories with that little bit of struggle in the middle. I love that. So, that's a wrap on episode 206 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Jeff and Robert for sharing their insights. And you can find links to them, their work, and all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog and newsletter and all of our previous episodes. And thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, select our track, and jiving along with us. I would love to hear from you, so please say hello or drop us a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff and I will dive into this Forrester concept of the demand unit waterfall, and Robert will be back in the virtual bar with a fresh marketing thoughts. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.